So it's way back. Good evening.
Good evening. You are live here at Courtside with the lawman,
And Carmen B.
and we are here to talk about issues related to criminal justice and the public.
And any kind of issues that you have, we would like to discuss them, whether it's with the criminal justice system or something going on criminally or in the criminal laws that change. So to do that, you could patch in through the chat line. You can give us a call at
916-443-5288.
or you can send it in by email at some point. But if you get in touch with us, we can deal with the subject matter the next time around. Now,
We would just like to say that we are an educational and an informational show. We are here to educate and to inform the public. If you call in and we answer a question that you have, it does not create an attorney client relationship between myself and the caller or between the lawman and the caller. But we do appreciate your calls. If you need a confidential consultation, you can contact Lawman at
443-5600, area code 916.
or Carmen B at 916-443-5288.
All right. So, Carm, here we are, another Friday. We have a new environment for you. So,
We like to try and keep it fresh.
yeah. So I got a new mask and all too. All right. Today, you said the subject matter is
Yes, it is the nominee for the Supreme Court. And there were confirmation hearings that occurred this week regarding her nomination and questioning her on her views on a variety of different subjects.
right. Our Constitution requires such a thing, and it allows the president to choose a nominee, and that nominee must pass. Now, it must pass, I guess, muster, as they say, or you just have to go through the questioning of Congress. What their purpose probably really is to ferret out what your belief system is and see whether you are qualified to sit on the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land.
I would note that usually they know the qualifications of the person long before they're ever nominated. In fact, I believe, and she is already a judge at this point,
Right.
Judge, and I think that she has two last
Yeah.
names. I think it's Brown Jackson.
Yeah.
So Judge Brown Jackson has already gone through a confirmation process in order to become a federal judge.
Right.
So this confirmation process was not something that was new to her. And the senators who were there, she was also not someone who was new to them. And her educational background, as well as her work history, spoke for itself in terms of whether or not she is qualified to hold this position.
Because the qualification of judges is not just that you've gone to law school or anything like that. There are issues that they look at, like what is your temperament? How do you behave and act on the bench? Are you fair to both sides? Do you show any kind of prejudice one way or the other? And what is your procedure for handling and dealing with legal issues when you are constrained by the Constitution and the doctrine of stare decisis, which says that you really have to follow the law that's in place?
What we do know is that the law can change. And by that, what I mean is even the Constitution. And you may say, well, how does it change? It's a written document. The words are the words. It is interpretation. Words are subject to interpretation. And one judge can interpret something one way, where another judge can view it entirely differently, or even slightly differently, as what the language actually means.
And realize we're talking about the Supreme Court of the United States, which, under an old case called Marbury versus Madison, has the final say on legal issues in America. That's why you can see the Supreme Court actually get behind something like Jim Crow and then overturn Jim Crow You can see it getting behind abortion. You can see it getting behind gay marriage.
And so the Constitution wasn't rewritten. There was just a different interpretation of what that meant. And sometimes that interpretation was more inclusive because when the Constitution was originally written,
We
we
were
were not
excluded.
we were
Right.
not considered, other than the fact
Chattel.
that we were considered as three-fifths of a person, for the
Yeah.
owner to have voting rights.
And basically, we were chattel. We are property. So we were never intended to participate in the system known as the United States government.
When the Constitution was written. So when you hear people talk about we want to go back to exactly what the founding fathers meant, what are they really saying?
Right.
Because they have to know that a constitution has to be somewhat of a living, breathing document if it is going to be interpreted during the ages.
And what you have to look at also is the morality of society. What is society doing that forces it to change? It's why they quickly grasped Jim Crow, because at the time they had passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So blacks were free, could vote. And then they realized at some point, well, wait a minute, what did we just do? And so in came Jim Crow, in that we can treat them as second class citizens still. Oh, they're still separate, but we'll call it equal now. And that was the law for over 100 years or so. And
Under the Constitution.
right,
The
backed by the
same,
Constitution.
yes, the same Constitution that we have today.
Right. That in 50, what was it, 55, in Brown versus Board, said that separate but equal is not a good thing. Now, they didn't go all out, you see, and realize that, well, you know what? We're going to take care of Black people at that particular time because we are recognizing that I guess we've been oppressing you for quite a while. But we're at least we're going to lift the separate but equal ban and allow you to now what? Fully participate in society. We're talking at the time I was born near in 55, 60, right in that area where we had a Vietnam War going on. We had a lot of peace rallies and students rising up. The turmoil over the civil rights move was really because they felt the time was right to push. And that's how we got a Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act passed. We started coming out with video. They started showing things on TV on how African Americans were being treated. And so it forces the law to change.
And I think people knew how African Americans were being treated during those times,
Sure.
but it wasn't put in their face, and if they weren't participants, and it wasn't put out there for the world to see.
Right.
Worldview can have an impact. We're seeing that right now with what's going on in Ukraine. And the fact that other countries are seeing the bloodshed and what is happening there, and the fact that civilian buildings and institutions are being targeted.
Right.
And so that worldview can have an impact. And the United States did not like the fact that the world was saying, hey, wait, you've come over here, you fought world wars, you've sent these African American people over here to fight for you, and then you are mistreating them in your own country.
And if you want to draw a parallel, and I haven't thought it completely out, but I'm just saying, look, Putin and his move over Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine's been there a long, long time. Ukraine broke off from the USSR. We're doing their own thing. Putin's sitting over there watching. For some reason, he decided, you know what? I want that. That's mine. And so starts a war. And what we've seen from other countries is, hey, what are we going to do about it? Because Putin, what is the first thing he did? Shut media down. He didn't want any pictures getting out as best he could. He didn't want anything to know, especially his own citizens. He had to keep them deaf, dumb, and blind because maybe they'll rise up against him. Now, draw a parallel to America. at a particular time. It wasn't, well, it became the citizens who uprose that caused the change. And it wasn't just black citizens, it was when whites got involved too. So people can make a change. And the parallel is what now is going to happen to Putin. What is the world going to do with him when this is over with? Because the world looked at what was happening here and thought they passed a few laws, everything's cool. But we see ramifications from that since then. So, what are the ramifications of him going into Ukraine, whether he takes it over or not in the future, to all the countries in the world? Because he feels like he's probably on an island now. And will all countries continue this kind of resistance to him, this kind of blockage to him?
Yes.
Or will they start again taking some Russian money? All right. So we know right away what she is doing is she is trying to get a position on a court that makes decisions as to the morality of society. And that is an important decision.
Do you have a question for Courtside?
We may have a question coming in here.
She will have to give you a call back.
Okay.
I'll have her give you a call back. Thank you.
Okay. So she's going for a position on a court whereby we call them the top legal positions pretty much in the country. And the reason is because of the power they wield as a unit.
Yes, that and the fact that it is a lifetime appointment to that court. Once someone is on that court, they are on that court until they decide to retire or until they pass away.
Right. And that's also true for any federal judge position. All the way down the circuit courts, which there are 13 circuits throughout the United States, and probably 9 to 11 judges on each circuit, and the district court judges right here downtown at the federal court building.
Now, what we saw was quite a circus from the Republicans, many of the Republicans that were questioning her, including Senator Ted Cruz, with an enlarged book on anti-racist or how to be an anti-racist baby. Now, he had no information that she had ever even seen, I don't believe, or even read that book. And I don't know how that book had anything to do with whether or not she is going to be a good justice for the United States Supreme Court.
The law is supposed to be colorblind, right? So whether she has a racist position or not should not even be an issue.
Additionally, one of the things that he was questioning her about was something that she wrote, I believe, when she was in law school, which would have been probably at least 30 some years ago, I'm guessing, because she is a little bit younger than us, I think, by a year or two. And about what she wrote at that time and what it meant. Someone who is in law school is still studying the law, still figuring out how to interpret the law. And so something that they wrote 30 years ago in terms of how they interpreted something should not be held against them. It's what have they done in that intervening time period?
Right. And if you're going to scrutinize something someone did 30 years ago, well, exactly what is the nature of your scrutiny? Is it to say they did a crime? Did they do something morally wrong? Or did they just have an opinion about something?
And we did see the scrutiny of a nominee who was accused of an act that would have been a crime, although he was never charged with the crime. And that was regarding whether or not he had physically, sexually battered or assaulted another young woman. And we saw those hearings. Now, you'll have some people say, well, the questioning in that case was no worse than the questioning that that the nominee here had to endure. And
But she's
It
not
was,
charged with anything.
and that was my point exactly. He
Yeah,
also
he
was
wasn't
not
charged,
charged, but
but
there
yeah,
was
he
an
wasn't charged, but not alleged
there was an
allegations were not made.
accusation
Right,
that he had committed a criminal
right.
act. And so that was the reason that his nomination hearings, confirmation hearings, took the turn that they took there, with there being a great focus on what he had done, what he remembered,
Right.
regarding that, as well as the testimony that they took from the
The
woman who
individuals,
was
yes.
the young girl at the time of the allegations.
Right. I'll tell you, just to draw a parallel again, look at what's happening to Deshaun Watson, the quarterback, facing such allegations. You know, he had to sit out a whole year. He couldn't do his job because of the allegations. And it turns out now no one wants to criminally prosecute. So these are going to be strictly civil matters. So, and that's the same kind of allegations made against this individual trying to be a judge that's going to make decisions on all of our lives,
But
not just throw touchdowns.
who actually became, and who
Yes,
was
he
confirmed, his
is making
nomination was
decisions
confirmed,
about our
and he
lives.
is on that Supreme
Right.
Court.
He never threw a touchdown. So it goes to show when you come into these things, you got to listen to what people say. And the first thing you have to say is just like if it was coming in as evidence, is it relevant to the proceedings? Is it relevant to whether or not she can sit as a judge of the U.S. Supreme Court?
What also amazes me is that when it is an African American, there is more pressure placed upon the nominee to prove that you are not somehow anti white.
Right.
But that same analysis is not applied when the nominee is a white person, to prove that we're going to put you on the highest court in the land. Prove that you are not going to engage in racism against the litigants that come before you.
Hmm.
That doesn't happen when the nominee is white.
You want to break that down a little further?
Maybe that is, again, because of what we know to exist, whether people deny it or not, and that is a certain amount of white privilege, a certain view that this position belongs to me. Why not? Why is there any question? Just because of who I am.
Why should I have to prove that I won't help Black people? Why do I have to say that? I mean, that was one of the things I think Obama had to get over. Is everyone just were waiting for him to just say reparations? They were waiting to say enslave white people. You know, I mean, I think people really feared that he would do something like that. And
Instead of just looking at the individual's qualifications and determining from there, because that is how it would occur if there's no allegations against the person. You look at their qualifications and don't focus on their race
right.
or their nationality. But we still do that in this country.
Oh yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, well, why? If people are telling you that they're colorblind and that they don't see color, then why is race an issue at all? It's an issue because it's the elephant in the room that we choose a lot of times to not address and not discuss, and the white privilege that is the other elephant that is squishing us
Yes.
in the room that we must acknowledge exists. No, does that make you a horrible person because you benefited from it? No, we're not saying that at all. But what we're saying is we have to acknowledge that that exists. And if we want to be a better country, if we want to be the country that we aspire to be, we have to address these issues.
Right. And I mean, I'll make a quick point. If we're both running the 100-yard dash and you put a hurdle or two in my lane, then it's an unfair race to the top because you put a hurdle there. Oh, I could hurdle over the thing, but I better be faster hurdling over those things than the person in the other lane. And sometimes that's how it feels when you're African American and you're trying to move up or get somewhere, is that I'm going to have to do a couple of hurdles in order to get to the same place as anyone else. And another thing, we always see people who are scrutinized because in their past, what they have done is they may have dressed in blackface. They may have done something kind of racist and stuff when they were a kid or in college or something like that. And we give a lot of scrutiny to it, and they have to explain how they were young then and they were stupid then and they didn't mean anything then by it. But how many times in a black person's past have you been accused of putting on whiteface and running around and acting like you're a white person or something? Or doing something of that sort and that nature to hurt another race? Hardly ever. So we talk to these people and they say, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I was upset and all this stuff. And then they become what they become. We tell them, oh, that was this, and we'll forgive. But once again, it's like running a hurdle race against a person who doesn't have it. So here she is hurtling her way to the Supreme Court.
One of the other things that they tried to discuss to kind of disparage her was related to sentences that she had imposed to those appearing before her in her courtroom regarding child pornography cases. Well, it is my understanding that the sentences that she imposed are in line with what all judges in all judges in federal court
guidelines
have been sentencing people
right.
to. But they wanted to create this image. It's that, dog whistle for those fringe people in society who have this belief that there are people of the left or Democrats who are engaged in some kind of pornography ring. And so to bring this up when they know that her sentences are in line with the guidelines is just, again, a form of them trying to do a racist dog whistle against her.
Right. And there was another question I just saw people talk about was whether she had to define a woman. They asked her to tell us what a woman is. And she said, I'm not going to answer that question. And some people are like, oh, that's a cop out, or she was wise not to touch that question. Because once again.
And I suppose that again goes to trying to do the dog whistle for people who are against transgender
yes.
people. And we're seeing right now in our country that there are people who are not people, there are laws being passed in numerous states that are to have a negative effect on transgender people and their families. Right. I believe in Texas, thank goodness, I think a judge has stayed has stayed the law at this time or issued an injunction, but they were going to investigate families of transgender children with the plan that they would be able to say that to allow your child to be transgender is some sort of child abuse, when the opposite is true. If your child is truly a transgender and they feel deep within that they are in the body of the sex that they are not in their hearts, to force them to stay in that position does more harm to them. And we know it by the number of transgender suicides that we see when they don't have a support system that supports them. And to me, if you think about it, it is common sense. When a child is formed, there are billions of chemical processes that have to come from 2 cells. You get eye cells, nose cells, ear cells, hair cells, liver cells, heart cells, skin cells, ears, everything you can think of. DNA. And so during that process, can things go wrong? Can they? We know they can. How do we know? Because sometimes you get a baby who's born, who's missing an arm or missing a leg, or has an organ that's born on the outside of the body. So if those, so if those things can happen, can it not also happen that someone be born who should have been born a girl, but who has boy parts?
Because if you really listen to any DNA expert, and they'll tell you that the difference between those two is so slight. Everything else is the same, except that one little Y chromosome that pops up.
And what does it hurt you to let someone else live their authentic self?
Right. When
It
doesn't
hurts
affect
you not
Right.
one bit. And this mindset that people have, well, oh, people are going to be transgender just so they can try and get into the other bathroom. That doesn't happen. Number one, nobody wants to. A bathroom is a place you go into to do what you have to do in that place. It's
Yeah,
not some place where
Go
someone
ahead.
is going to change their gender just so that they can be able to go in there.
Right. Right. That's
So those
scare
arguments,
tactics
yeah,
and
those
things like
arguments
that.
are
Right.
ridiculous.
So asking her that question, and I think, okay, she stayed away from it, and that's probably proper. I think her staying away from it is a stand saying, why are you asking me that damn question?
And
So,
how is it relevant? How is
right,
that definition relevant to whether or not
right,
I'm the right woman for this
right.
job?
What decisions am I going to make because someone's a woman or not? So we know the scrutiny is it may be unfair, but it just requires a candidate who will sit there and smile and look at them in the face and give their answer. And I believe they'll huff and they'll puff, but she's going to be nominated or she's going to be approved. They'll huff and they'll puff and stuff, and come up with books or something. But it will make no difference, and she'll be on the bench. And what does that do? Well, it just gives a different perspective.
And the reason we need different perspectives on that high court is because of the different people that come before that court.
The court should represent the society.
It should.
It should, and
Now,
it lacks a lot in that.
now that being said, um, the someone's complexion does not guarantee that they are going to be one way or another.
Favoring that or not, right?
Yes, because we all know that we have an African American male justice on the court.
Been there quite a while.
Yes, who is extremely conservative in all of his views, including those that impact criminal defendants.
And the recent stories regarding his wife and her association with the people on January 6th and the hugely conservative, deep down, almost crazy views that she spouts as a Supreme Court justice wife, people have to look into that. They really do. And they have been on the side, but they haven't made a huge noise of it
Now,
yet.
of
But,
course, the wife may say, I am a separate being from
right.
my husband. I am not on the court, so I'm allowed to have my own views.
Right.
Um, and that is absolutely true. But traditionally, the spouse of Supreme Court justices try to stay away from, um,
Controversial groups or groups that may go against the government.
yes. And that is clearly what we saw happen
Yeah.
on that day of January 6th.
Right. So
And I believe they are still
investigating her.
They're still investigating. They're
Oh,
still
yeah. They just-
prosecuting and sentencing
Right.
individuals from that incident.
Right.
And it was a pure attack on our government, on our
Threats
system of
made to the
government.
vice president, threats made to people in Congress, in Senate. That's amazing because you can threaten your neighbor and get more jail time. Okay, or go right to jail.
Yes.
Just by saying, I'm a kid, I don't like you, get your stuff off my lawn. And these people are threatening political officers. You see, that could lead to far worse things like coups as well as assassinations.
And we see that happen in other countries. We have to think about how strong we want our democracy to be.
Right. Look at the Michigan governor. Yeah, they thank God they found a plot, that was going to off her. I mean,
Yes. And so again, this is why, and Lawman says this every show, it is extremely, extremely important to vote.
Yes.
And we would remind people, especially related to criminal justice, that we have an election coming up for the district attorney of Sacramento County.
Right. The sheriffs too,
Yes,
and a lot of city council members.
yes.
So educate yourself, and then go out and vote for the candidate who is probably the most qualified, who will look forward to change in the office, but yet maintain its integrity. And that's the key thing, is when you change a leader, it doesn't mean that everything changes. That's only on baseball teams, football teams, that cultures change when you change the coach. But you change the coach of the DA's office, they're going to still prosecute people. Okay. They're
So
gonna,
any
yeah,
belief that, oh, if a certain person gets into office, it'll just be
right,
complete chaos, they won't be prosecuting crimes.
right,
Again, that's a scare tactic.
right. So, you know, and she's right. Look, in democracy, one of the two main things is how we treat people who are charged with crimes and how we allow you to participate in it. And voting is one of the major ways of participating in this democracy.
So if you are not registered to vote, get registered to vote. And
Right,
even though you may say, well, I'm not charged with a crime, I don't care who the DA is. That's fine until someone that you love is charged with a crime.
right.
And then you will care
That's
who
right.
that district attorney is. So what we're telling you is you have to care about these things now
Be active.
before it has a personal impact on your life.
Exactly. I mean, preach to them, Carmen. I mean, that's the basic thing here. You know, we get an opportunity to do this on the backs of so many dead people who wanted to do this and couldn't do it, or were punished by death for trying
For
to do it.
trying to vote.
So for us as a people to take it lightly at all, it always amazes me.
And I know a lot of people say, well, I don't see the immediate change. Someone changes, there's someone out new that's voted in, but it's the same old politics. Sometimes you won't see the
Right,
immediate change, but maybe your children will
right,
down the line. Maybe your grandchildren will. And that is why these things are important. It's not always just about how it's going to affect you immediately.
right.
How is it going to affect
The
your
future.
descendants?
And that's the way with any laws. Think about any court decisions and things like that. When they even overturned Jim Crow, it took 9, 10 years for states to even start accepting it. And they were forced to do it. So, yeah, your vote today may not change something tomorrow, but you keep on voting. You keep on the side of right. And eventually things do change. We just have to recognize our power economically and at the ballot box.
That is it.
Yes, it is.
All right, we've come to the conclusion of another episode of Courtside with Lawman.
And Carmen B.
And we'd ask you, we understand that things are changing in terms of what is required related to COVID, but we ask everyone to continue to
Yes.
try and be safe and protect your loved ones. Um,
And get out there and be active in your society, in your groups.
yes.
All right.
Have a good evening.
Take care.
We'll see you here next Friday, 6 p.m. Bring your questions
Courtside
with Lawman
and Carmen B.